This is Sherilyn. I hope everybody's doing great. I wanted to go over today about weeds. However, before we get the day started, I needed to work on my eggs for the freeze dryer. So I'm currently going to be scrambling about 6 dozen eggs with my handy dandy mixer. I get these eggs from a friend of ours. This is our freeze dryer. We have a dehydrator up on top of the unit. Yeah, we get these eggs from a friend of ours down the road. We have an agreement that I would freeze dry them for them, and we'd get half, and we'd give them the other half back. So all I'm doing is just cracking them and using my mixer to scramble them up. Nothing super exciting. This is our vacuum sealer, or vacuum pump, for our freeze dryer. I was changing the oil in it. We have a medium-sized freeze dryer. It holds about 4 trays. They come in different sizes. And I found a couple of itty-bitty eggs. They're cute, but you can still eat them. And I was also talking to my husband, who's on the couch. So after I mix every batch here, I just pour them into the trays evenly, and we'll be sticking them in the freeze dryer. And these will take several hours to freeze dry, especially since they have a lot more fluid to them. That freeze dryer has been very, very handy. I know a lot of people are concerned because of how pricey it is, but it does a lot of work, and it does save us a lot of food in the long run. Happy Memorial Day to everybody today. It's been a nice weekend off from work, and I am in my vehicle because of that reason right there. My animals and my kids, trying to get a peaceful moment to video real quick. Everybody's currently kind of still in bed, and I just felt like I could get up and have a peaceful moment to video, so just bear with me. So again, we're still dealing with tornadoes. Anyways, I'm hearing noises. I'm going crazy. Anyways, yeah, we're still dealing with tornado season, and fortunate more towns have gotten hit. We had Pryor, they had 2 fatalities there. And then in Claremore, unfortunately, that's where my folks live, and the tornado started about a mile or 2 from their house, and with the path it took, my parents are fortunate they did not get hit. It passed them about half a mile from their house. So we dodged a major bullet, but I haven't heard any fatalities yet. But the town really directly took a hit, downtown and some surrounding areas. There is a equestrian racetrack there. From what I heard, they had to put a horse down, and several of them sustained some injuries. The barns did take some hits, but the bigger one was the RV park that was located at the Will Rogers Downs that took a direct hit. From what I understand, though, in Claremore, they were lucky they did not have any fatalities, which is great. The town, from what I also heard, they were completely out of power. Even their substations were damaged. That they had, the hospitals had to evacuate the patients and send them to other hospitals because there was no power at all. They were telling townspeople if they needed gasoline, for instance, there was no available gas for them. So it was pretty rough. The damage is not as bad as Sulphur, thank God, but some of the damage was downtown, from what I understand. The courthouse of Rogers County, I believe, and the jail took a hit. So they were fortunate, better off than what prior, from what I understand, got. But that's just besides the point. We just keep tugging along. With tornado season, we get a little break, and from what I understand, starting back up Wednesday. This is Monday. On Wednesday through Sunday, we have chances going back up again. So I'm taking the opportunity to get out in our garden, and I will video some more me being in the garden, so we can go by and show you exactly the weeds that I go through in this video, how they pertain in your garden and what they look like. I wanted to include all the pictures as much as I could and a brief description of all these weeds that I come across in our garden. However, if I go through all the weeds that I come through, the list will just go on and on and on, and it will become a pretty boring video. The weeds that I did include in this video, though, are the main general weeds that I come across in my garden, and this includes my vegetable garden and my flower beds. So let's get started. I, again, will give you a video or pictures of a lot of these weeds and kind of give you an idea about them. Some of these weeds, do your research. They are not necessarily horrible weeds. They're just a pest in our flower beds. And some of these weeds are actually good to eat in your food. They have benefits to them. But not all these weeds I would suggest ingesting. So please do your research on these weeds if you are interested in any of that. I will not go into those the information on that at all because I'm not very knowledgeable in edible weeds and whatnot. So please take that as a disclaimer. I know there's probably going to be questions about that out there, but I do not have that kind of knowledge to share, so bear with me on that. Some of these weeds, I am learning myself because I have never actually did research on these weeds. So this was kind of a learning experience for me. I just know that they are weeds, but I just never actually, knew the name about them. I just knew to pull them out of my garden. I also want to share, and I will start this first, is that there are different classifications of these weeds, which I knew. I did know this. So you have what they call the broadleaf weeds, which are the leaves, just basically what it states. These weeds have pretty large leaves on them, indicating that they are broadleaf. The grass weeds, are just like they indicate. They are grasses. Grass weeds. And Bermuda is not necessarily a weed, even though it's a pest. Bermuda does grow pretty rampant and is invasive, but it's not necessarily a weed. It's just a grass. But if you're growing, or let's say you have a lawn that you are trying to maintain, these grass weeds are actually considered weeds in your lawn. So they do have their own classification of grass weeds. This weed is very pesky in my garden. It's also known as goosefoot or white goosefoot, white pigweed. It can be confused with wild spinach and green pigweed. There's different varieties out there. However, it does germinate easily when you till up your garden. So if you are trying to get a garden space going, very much so, I would suggest tarping it for a while. The seed heads do last for decades from what I understand. So keeping these weeds from going to seed is very, very critical. They typically come up in the spring, the cool spring, and will keep growing through the summer months. The other thing too to consider is they do get very tall. I'm talking about 5 to 7 feet tall if you allow them to grow. This weed, everybody knows, it's a pain in the butt. It is the infamous ragweed. And keeping the population down will keep your allergies down. Everybody is allergic to it. And the reason everybody has their seasonal allergies this time of year is because they do come up in the springtime. This pesky lettuce can be confused with thistle. It will produce a milky substance when you break the leaves off, and it is very prickly. And the main thing about this plant I do want to insinuate is that it has a long taproot that goes into the soil. So when you're pulling this weed up, you want to make sure and get the root up. So this plant is a cool season weed that will begin germinating in the fall. So you'll see this prevalent, not necessarily in the spring, but more in the fall. You won't see much of it in the summer either because it's just too hot. And it can be pesky just because it's a vining-ish type plant. The cool thing that I did read up on is that it is capable of fixing nitrogen in the soil. So that will be beneficial to your cover crops also. and your other surrounding plants. So this grass can be often confused as crabgrass in a sense because it grows in a clump. And I also found out that this is not native to the United States. It actually was imported here from South America in the 1800s, and it was used as a forage plant. It has now become a troublesome weed for our flower beds and our vegetable gardens. They are easily contained by pulling the roots, and since the roots are a shallow root, it makes it easy to pull out, but it is critical to pull them out before they do seed because they will spread throughout your garden. So some of these weeds on here are considered weeds. However, it's actually kind of funny. This is one of those weeds that actually grow in my flower bed. This one my grandmother despised so much because it is somewhat semi-invasive. They grow in clumps, and but they produce these beautiful purple flowers, as you can see in the photo. But you want to put these, if you want to grow them somewhere where you have no problem of them getting in your grass yard and whatnot, and where they can spread easily. If you contain them well enough, there's not going to be much of an issue. But my grandmother hated them because they did grow throughout her grass yard. But they are a beautiful flower. This plant is easy to identify because it kind of just looks like no other. It is very easy to pull out of your flower bed because it grows as a clump, very low to your flower bed. But if you let it grow, it will overtake your flower bed or your vegetable garden. So, interesting fact on this one is that apparently it is part of the carnation family. It is also known as mouse ear, which I thought that was a pretty interesting fact. Like the last weed, it does grow low to the ground. However, it has more of a hilly look to it than the last one. They are very easy to pull out of your garden because they grow as a clump. This one I may get pushed back because I don't know if you would necessarily call this a weed in itself. It does grow as wildflowers. There is different varieties of aster out there. I did find out that there's like 250 species out there of asters that are located all over the world. Asters is funny because some people do grow it in their flower beds, and they are very pretty to look at, but just not in my garden. LOL, I'm just kidding. So this weed can be confused as henbit. However, the difference is the leaf structure on this plant. It is a cool season plant, kind of like henbit. It's usually your first weed to emerge after winter into spring, and will last for a few weeks. To contain them in your garden, you'll just have to pull them out, and the sooner the better before they produce the flowers, so they don't spread. So this one I was kind of intrigued by because I find this in my flower beds a lot. However, it does say that this habitat that it likes to grow in is typically in poor managed soils and whatnot. So This one kind of grows similar to spurge and chickweed. It grows pretty low to the ground, but you notice the yellow ball looking flowers on them. So this one is a very intriguing one to me, and that's why I wanted to add it to this list. It doesn't necessarily grow in my flower beds or my vegetable gardens, but it actually grows in my pastures on my homestead. And at first I thought it was just an ugly weed and whatnot, but on the flip side, when it started flowering, it was very intriguing to me. The other funny thing about this is actually one of those weeds that actually you can buy from a seed store. And some of these weeds that are on this list you can buy from a seed store or a plant store, which I thought was very interesting. However, I have kind of learned from what over the years what it is, and I've actually have been letting it grow throughout my pastures because it really is not that invasive, but it is very beneficial to your butterflies that you're trying to attract to your garden and other beneficial insects. So be careful pulling this weed out of your lawn, or if you do end up getting one in your flower bed, that would be just very intriguing to me. So this plant has various names to it. I tried to include some of those names that people refer them to. This plant is not hard to spot. You see it a lot alongside the roads and whatnot. This one is kind of similar how it grows to dandelions. It will look like a prickly lettuce. You do want to wear gloves, and I should have stated that with the prickly lettuce, because when you go to pull it, it does kind of do a number on your hand. So it grows the flower, and then it goes to seed, and it produces all those seed heads like you see on dandelions, and they blow in the wind, and they just spread like wildfire. So this one was similar to dead nettle. The only difference is how the leaves grow on this plant, but it does have the same characteristics as dead nettle, that it is one of your first weeds to come up after winter season. And it's very prolific in my flower beds for sure, and throughout my yard. So this plant was very intriguing to me, and I'm going to have to kind of read the description on this. This one actually is more prolific in the summer months. It is very heat tolerant and drought tolerant. This was actually introduced into the United States, and it is very, very similar to, if you know what amaranth is. And it has various markets in our industry. So they become very tall, and they are known for their oval leaves, but you could see the seed heads on them are very intriguing. So the way to eradicate these is, again, just pulling them out of your garden and whatnot. But they are a problem in no-till production systems, which is very, very interesting. So, fun fact on this one. So I've always known it as the Wandering Jew, which I will produce an actual picture of one. But growing up, this is what I've always referred it to. So please don't hate on me on this. Also, this was one of those that were very intriguing too, because I always thought this was an actual flower, because the flowers on these are very, very similar to the violets. They are very pretty, purplish, blue-ish color flower. The main reason I started pulling them out of my garden, though, is they are super, super prolific and invasive. And if you don't keep them contained, they will spread like wildfire. But if you like them as your wildflower, they are beautiful on those, and they have a unique look to them. So this one, I believe, is very similar to Creepin' Charlie, and that the way it grows is that it grows pretty low to the ground, but the leaves on it is a pretty unique plant. It can be nicknamed as the parsley, or parsley, excuse me, I can't talk. But I'm not sure if this one would be considered an edible weed in itself. But this one kind of correlates with henbit and dead nettle in that it is a cool season weed, and that it will be one of your first weeds to emerge in the cool season, when your season's about to change to spring. So this one was an interesting one, again, that I was really excited about, because this one I kind of grow in my garden myself. It's called oxalis. And oxalis, there's a variety of different species. This is more of a weed-like appearance, because the flowers are smaller and then the leaves are smaller than what I typically grow. I have a variety that I associate with is called pinks, and it's just because of the pink flowers on it. There's other varieties. I've seen white, I've seen orange, all sorts of other colors. This is more called wood sorrel, and it can be confused with clover. The other term, too, that it's associated with is shamrocks, and from what I also read, it means little clover, and it's a corruption of the Irish, and is what the word refers to. So this variety, though, does grow as a clump, and sometimes I've seen them, the leaves look a little more brownish, or more of a purplish color. There's other varieties of oxalis that do have a purplish leaf, and they grow really dark. I have a variety that is called shamrock that have lavender flowers on them. They're very, very pretty, and I'll leave some pictures for you so you can understand what I'm referring to. This weed is a grassy weed that has a spreading, grassy, creepy growth habit. It is a perennial, which means it grows back every year. And it kind of will stay kind of short to the ground. It kind of has a carpet look appearance. It is more of a pain in lawns. However, I've been dealing with this a lot in both my flower and vegetable beds. So this one is a cool one, because upon a lot of the reading that I have done on this plant, it is commonly eaten in a lot of popular dishes. It is an edible weed. However, I do want to really specify to do your research before you try to eat this weed, but it also can be another one of those that is nuisance in your flower beds. So this grass is commonly mistaken for switchgrass. The seed heads on this grass resembles switchgrass quite a bit. One thing about this one is that if you raise livestock, especially cattle, this plant, especially when it's matured, it can cause problems and is toxic to cattle. As far as I know, it's not toxic to any other ruminant type species out there, but it can really cause cattle to bloat, and in the long run can cause death. It is not toxic to humans or your pets, but it just, like any other weed we have on this list, can be a pain in the butt to eradicate. So this one is actually called sandburrs. They have many names to them: prickly burrs, long spines, burrs. They are one of those grasses that is the bane of my existence. I have this throughout my lawn, and it's really difficult to eradicate. There's not a whole lot of pesticides. It's more of management of your lawns that can eradicate this. Mainly mowing your lawns very, very short and bagging the grass will help manage these and maybe even eradicate them. They typically grow in poor soils. However, I have some around some of my flower beds. That's the only reason that this is on the list. They do get in your feet. They come in our house a lot of times and get in our carpets. The dogs will get them in their paws, and it hurts really bad. And when you get overwhelmed with them, when you're weed eating your clothes, you will know that's what you have. So this grassy weed is very critical to pull these out of your flower beds before they reach maturity. Their root systems can reach up to 4 feet deep, which is super deep, and once that occurs, they will be drought tolerant. They often start in moist, poorly drained lawn areas, but again, I do a lot of times pull them out of my flower beds. Once you see one, you're typically going to see hundreds. Their seeds often look like little nutlets. This wheatgrass is commonly mistaken for crabgrass just because of the way it grows. It can grow in a rosette formation along the ground. It is commonly more found in lawns, but again, this is another one of those that I have pulled out of my flower beds consistently. One way also to determine what this grass is due to the seed heads. So this weed, it's ironic how you can type in a characteristic of a weed and get it pulled up. This one I noted it as sticky weed, but there's other names for it, actual names. It's called grip grass, catchweed, veg straw. And so it is very common here in North America in a variety of habitats, included forests and woodlands and meadows. So this variety does grow in cooler months. It usually also kind of really takes off in the springtime when things are starting to pick up. So this broad leaf plant, I have read, it was actually interesting, is that it's a member of the buckwheat family. And it is commonly, or was brought over here from Europe with early settlers, and they suspect that it came over on their coats, the seeds. This is a very toxic plant to livestock, so if you plan on having livestock in that area where it's commonly grown, I would highly suggest eradicating it. It is very prevalent on my property for sure, and I consistently battle this weed. You can mow it down and whatnot, but to get rid of it, it is ideal to just dig it up and trash it. Out of this whole list, everybody will recognize this plant. It is very common in lawns, and it can be a very nice plant to have. It really attracts all the butterflies and the bees very, very well. So necessarily on this one, I like to keep around, despite it kind of not really looking pleasing to the eye. So this is another weed that you would recognize, and it's the dandelion. And the flowers on this plant are actually edible. People have been increasingly making jellies, especially out of it. And it's a pain in the butt only because if you do not get the full root, it can become more aggressive the next time you try to pull it up. So really make sure not only you're containing the seeds, but pulling up the whole plant. So this one is not necessarily one that I have problem in my flower beds, but I have had around my property, and it took some time to eradicate it. And it's just through certain sprays that you can use, and you just got to be persistent. But I also put it on my list because if you're starting a new garden and you want to know where you could put it and what is around that garden, you want to be able to access it for one and not have issues with it, but to remove it before it does become a nuisance in your garden. So the first one is poison ivy, then you got poison oak, and then poison sumac. So the way that I identify it is, yes, the leaves of 3, let it be. The poison ivy typically grows more as a bush or a vine, whereas the poison oak more grows as a shrub, but it can also grow as a vine. But the difference between the two are, one has a pointier tip leaf, whereas the poison oak has more of a rounded tip. Poison sumac is typically clusters of 7 to 13 leaflets, and they're arranged in pairs, and they are more grown as a tree. So if you have any questions about that, please feel free to reach out, or there's a lot of information online for that, because as you know, if you get it on the oils on you, you can have a severe reaction to it. So this weed is very, very complicated. It does grow rampant on my property, and it's very, very frustrating for sure. It's up there with the curly dock. The cool thing really reading on this plant is that yes, it does have a strong smelling smell to it. The root it resembles horseradish, but it is poisonous, so please do not eat. Pokeweed is native to wet or sandy areas of North America. The berries contain a red dye used in color wine, candies, cloth, and paper. The mature stalks, which are red or purplish in color, are like the roots, poisonous, so please do not eat. Leaves and very strong shoots, they can get up to about 6 inches, and they can be edible if properly cooked, though the cooking water should be thrown away. But again, I cannot stress this enough. If you decide to eat some of these plants as edibles, please really do your research. So this weed is considered a noxious weed, which is basically it competes a lot of your plants. It's very similar looking to carrot tops. It also can be misconstrued as hemlock. Difference between hemlock, which is also poisonous, and wild carrot is that hemlock does grow a whole lot taller than wild carrot. Wild carrot can only get to 1 to 4 feet tall and can grow within your lawn also. So this is one of those plants I kind of laugh at because I made the mistake one time buying a set of seeds of this because apparently it does come in multiple colors, but I also didn't realize that this flower does grow rampant in my lawn. So yeah, I feel like a dummy. So some of these plants I have in this video are kind of like that. You can buy them from the seed store or plant store, but just be very careful on that because once you get it, you can't get rid of it. Yarrow does have healing properties and benefits, so please look into that because it sounds like it's a really good plant to have. This one I have also seen grown in the stores and is for sale because it is a very showy plant once it grows fully as a vine. You grow it in an area that it can just take over. I did read though that it does produce berries which are highly toxic and can be fatal if eaten. And so just be very aware of that. I have this non-stop in my garden. No matter how hard I keep pulling up the roots on this, there is always more somewhere else. So this plant also gets mistaken as poisonous because it almost resembles poison ivy or poison oak. But just know this one has 5 leaves, whereas your poison ivy and poison oak has 3 leaves. In this section, I just wanted to include some pretty flowers that you would typically see here in Oklahoma. Some of these flowers you could see growing completely in the wild where you cannot grow them in your flower beds. And the one that really comes to mind is Indian paintbrush. It is technically actually a type of parasite that grows. It has to have grasses with it to grow. That's how it thrives. Other flowers that you see here, morning glory is one. Phlox is another. You can grow within actually your flower gardens. The hibiscus you typically see in your garden centers that are tropical. However, if you go to an actual garden center that actually provides some of these flowers, you can get what they call the hardy hibiscus, and that's what I have growing in my garden. So typically here on the homestead, this is kind of daily life, if you would say. I have a good friend. She also runs her own homestead raising cattle and horses. So you kind of develop a community within each other to help each other out in certain situations, and such as this, where my mower kind of was not working right. Turns out there was a switch that was off that I wasn't aware of. So she was helping me out by dropping her mower off, and she was going to take mine to work on. She's very knowledgeable in mowers and weed eaters and whatnot. So it's really nice to have that community with fellow homesteaders. Well, this ends the video now, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and we'll see you on the next one.